Hi, folks. How you doing today? There will be no technology discussed in this deck, in this talk. It is lovely to have you here with me. I am Tarah Wheeler. I'm CEO of Red Queen Dynamics. And for many of my sins, I've been asked to do some testimony before on information security policy in front of the Washington State Legislature and in front of the US Senate. So are you all in the correct talk? All right. The flight to Atlanta is next door. All right. Good. So it's wonderful to be here with you today. What I want to do is let you know that I'm going to talk for about 45 minutes, and then at the very end, I'm going to do a Q&A that's going to be more extensive than most people do. And the reason for that is I'm going to ask our lovely AV crew at the back, thank you very much for them, and the hard work they've been doing all day long. Much appreciated. Thanks, guys. I'm going to ask them to turn off recording, and that is because I'm going to get fucking real. And I'm going to name names, and I'm going to tell you who to talk to. Several of those people are here in the room today. So we're going to be super real, and I'm going to ask you all to, during that period of time, not talk talk online, not quote me, not take pictures or record what I'm going to say, and that's so I can be real with you. How many people here are resident in Washington State? Excellent. This is why. We're going to save our fucking state, people. Okay? We got to do something. So I am super glad to be here with you today, and I'm going to talk about what I have ended up doing, why I'm here, and really just kind of get into the nature of what information security, testimony, and policy looks like. So I've done this a couple of times. I've been that person who's been asked to testify, and I felt pretty scared, I think, initially. I ended up doing a pretty good job the first time and the second time and hopefully the third time. And the reason for that was I had a good crew of people who knew what they were doing, who were behind the scenes. There is no time that you will ever be asked to testify in terms of information security policy in which you should ever do it on your own, okay? At least 20 people are going to be behind the scenes helping you, making sure that you're doing a good job and ensuring that you know what the hell you're talking about when you get asked a question. More than that, even if you know what you're talking about, how to phrase it to the kinds of people you're going to be talking to. Okay, cool. So, no shit, there I was. It was this early 2020, and I was driving our 4Runner down. I think my husband wasn't even in the state at the time, and I was asked to testify on right to repair. This was in front of the Washington State Senate, and at the Washington State Senate, they were considering a right to repair bill locally. I care a lot about this because right to repair is a topic that really touches a lot of communities. It touches abandonware, e-waste. It touches the ability of people who are trying to get into technology to get those service, repair, and support jobs, many of whom don't have a lot of access to the kinds of educational opportunities that many people in this room have had. So I cared a lot that manufacturers might lock the ability of devices to get literally just a battery casing, like a battery housing solder redone at a shop, or like a screen replacement. They're trying to stop this, right? And this is the kind of thing you can pay somebody $30 for at a fix-it shop. And this is not only a great source of income for people breaking into technology, but it's also something that lets them fix something that you might have thrown away otherwise, right? So I care a lot about that. Then I got asked to do it again. This was during COVID. It was not as much fun. But, you know, I did some work on that as well, too. And as a result of having done these things and being somebody that was seen to answer questions well and clearly to legislators, I got asked to testify in front of the US Senate. This is the Department of Homeland Security's committee examination on why the CSRB, the Cyber Safety Review Board, was or wasn't kind of fulfilling its obligations. That happened in January of this year. Shortly thereafter, I was like, I should propose to Bsides Seattle and have this conversation. So that's my lovely spouse behind me. He was just like beaming. This is Deviant Olaf for those that don't know him in the room, but he does physical security stuff. And he was just thrilled. So what is this like? What's this process like? It is super, super, super opaque. Here in Washington State, what's going to happen basically is somebody that you've never heard of, who's like 24 years old and like an assistant legislative, director or assistant, is going to circulate your profile, your public profile, internally inside a group of people who are going to figure out whether or not you seem like you would be a good fit to testify in front of a committee, okay? They're going to look at things like whether or not they like your face. They're going to figure out whether or not you are the kind of person who would be a good fit in front of the committee. And when we say fit, a lot of times we're talking about identity stuff. I'm going to jump into that in a second. This kind of thing right here, you don't know who to call to testify in front of Congress, I'm assuming, right? Who in here would like know the name and phone number of the person to call when it comes to testifying in front of a hearing and in your local legislature, right? You better put your hand up. I know you, Bo. Come on, there you go. I know you better than that. We're gonna have a conversation with you in a minute. Okay, that was a threat. All right. It's biased, okay? This is super, super biased, all right? This is a sausage factory, and we're gonna talk about that, all right? You're gonna get chosen to testify based on your likability and your perceived authority. These traits are strongly correlated with being a middle-aged white male who served in the military and who lives in Washington, D.C., okay? So this is, at least on the national level. On the local level, very strongly correlated with already existing privilege, all right? There's nothing you can do about that. Just like put it out of your mind right now because you can't solve that problem on an individual basis. As a collective community, there's some options to solve it, which is why I'm standing here. Partisan politics are going to happen to you. You can't control what your identity is if you are a woman, if you're a person of color, if you're a visible member of the queer community, okay? You may discover that just existing in the body you exist in has kind of made you seem too political to be a good fit for the panel of experts that will be empaneled to discuss this topic. And this matters, okay? This was a hearing that happened last summer in front of the House's Committee on the Internet. This is the House Subcommittee on Intellectual Property, the Internet, Trade Policy. I was supposed to be on this panel. And this right now is the kind of panel that is testifying in front of the House Committee on the Internet, okay? I know and like and respect some of these folks, but I want you to understand that there was possibly some politics behind the scenes. You never find out why you were deselected after you've been asked, okay? And that's just a thing you kind of have to get over a little bit. We'll talk more about this as well in the no video and real tea Q&A session later. You may never have more impact on American politics than getting a chance to do this, okay? I want to deeply encourage every person in this room, if you have an opportunity to testify or to help someone who's going to testify, to try to do some work on this process, all right? Everybody in here has technical expertise that matters, that is part of not only who you are and what you care about, but it's also something that you can use to make policy better. Who here thinks that American policy on technology is super great, going well, just fine? Great, cool. So that's the thing we're trying to fix, is get a little bit of reality, of clarity, of some good, strong analogies into the conversation when you're talking to policymakers, okay? This is about as much as you'll ever be able to do in US politics. I mean, is anybody in here planning on running for elected office one day? I am not, right? Oh, I love that, yeah. We got a couple hands. Okay, so this is wonderful. Anybody who's planning on running for office one day, I don't care if it's the PTA or the US Senate, this is part of the process of getting what you want done. It's at least partially going to be about selecting the experts that you think are going to best present your position and opinion, or at least present a pretty balanced version of what the real issues are in front of a committee that's going to determine something I still don't really understand, which is the markup on a bill, okay? I know some of the people that write laws, cybersecurity laws for this country, and I still don't really understand what this process of committee and markup and everything like that is, but there's just like a red line moment where I guess they all throw it into a Google Doc and share the link everywhere, and they just fix up the laws and then they pass it, you know. I presume that's how it works. I watched the cartoon like everybody else did. But you know, I think that's how it works. Like, and I've seen as much of this process as most people, I think, have in information security, and it's still super opaque to me. But I know this. Who's served jury duty in here before? I actually haven't. That's wonderful. So if you've served jury duty, that's an opportunity to directly interact with the law and its application where you are. But isn't it more interesting to be back where the law is made before it ever gets made and fix the problems in it? Fix the concept of a lack of sunsetting on outdated tech bills, right? Fix, for God's sake, the 1986 Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Okay, everybody in here has, if you haven't, please look it up. This is the law that governs the reason that we're all just a little stressed about the wireless in here today, right? This is the thing that is stopping many of us, or has stopped many of us in the past from being safe, keeping other people safe, or being clear about some of the vulnerabilities that we've found. So I want to see people in here actively, seriously working on trying to change that law. So this is an opportunity at 2 to 3 orders of magnitude to impact US politics. And that's going to be, it's really rewarding, is the best way to put it. It's super rewarding, meaningful, and purposeful for me. So one of the things that will also happen as you step into and out of the opportunity to testify is you're going to get a chance to meet some of these representatives, some of your legislators, policymakers, and senators. You'll also meet their staff. Their staff are going to be the ones who end up making, in general, the final decision on whether or not you testify and whether you come back. Make friends, okay? Make friends in that moment. Offer assistance. Be the person who reaches back out if they ask you for it and summarizes a current information security event with an easy-to-use analogy for their principle. Do you know what that word means in this context, their principle? Okay. For those who don't, the idea is that a principal is the person that they're there supporting. It could be their policymaker. In general, it means somebody who's like, they call them like a political or somebody who's elected, all right? It's the person whose name is on the little billboard thing, but I promise you they did not come up with that question about, relevant vulnerability disclosure mechanisms, all right? That was one of their staff that did that, and they've written those all down, okay? This is your chance to meet the people who are writing the questions that Senator Blumenthal or Senator Hassan are going to open their mouth and ask you in that moment. And this is your chance even to help influence the questions that need to get asked in future hearings, okay? This is super frustrating. It's so frustrating. Every time I get a chance to talk to policymakers and be part of that world, it is so opaque. It's not transparent. I was like, couldn't we just, and hear me out on this, guys, couldn't we just submit a PR? Couldn't we just figure out a way to make this law something that people with expertise can be part of, can contribute to, can fix directly? And the answer is no. They don't want it that way. It's not a thing we can do yet. The closest we can get to it, and this is super amazing, is respond to public requests for comment, RFCs, whenever you see somebody trying to do something, especially at CISA or the FTC, or anybody who has anything to do with requests for information on cryptography. Are there any pretty decent cryptographers in the room? It's cool if there's not. They're kind of like scattered. You have to bring them all together in a group and then give them food and then hug them a little bit and then back away because they didn't want hugs. But cryptographers are very important in this conversation because a lot of the conversations in policy are around emotion, around think of the children, around safety as opposed to security. So policymakers will respond to, in that moment when you've got their attention, emotion. They don't respond to the technical arguments that we'll all make, but if you've got a great analogy about how it keeps people safe, this is the moment to deploy it and practice it. Last point. This is also your opportunity to, especially to the staff of anybody in that room, mention the name of other qualified people that they should be talking to. Please consider the idea that somebody who is experiencing less privilege than you may have a harder time breaking into these halls of power. Barring the fact that I am a woman, I experience almost every privilege imaginable, okay? And I have found it unbelievably difficult to get included in a lot of these rooms. And I am here to tell you that Black women, members of the visibly queer community, find it incredibly difficult to get into those rooms and be taken seriously. Take this opportunity to get them in touch with the staff that are writing the questions and have their voices heard, okay? All right. So, who here is interested at this point in doing any of this work, in having conversations? Good. I see about 10, 15 people in here that are raising hands. That's good. By the end of this, I want there to be more because I'm going to tell you how to make this work. So what's going to happen when somebody thinks you should testify? They're going to circulate it internally. They'll circulate your public profile. If you've recently written an op-ed, if you've recently been on TV doing conversations about information security, if you've done anything that's gotten some notice, you may be more likely to be asked to have a conversation about this because you're seen as more of an expert, okay? That may or may not be true, and that's one of the reasons you get complete idiots testifying in front of Congress, okay? So the media is part and parcel of this. Learning to work with them a little bit can sometimes pay some good dividends. I strongly suggest, for those of you like me who are upon occasion a little bit awkward, consider writing maybe as opposed to appearing on television. It's a little bit stressful to do that, and sometimes it's hard to do it in person and live without coming off like a giant nerd. So consider some writing, get some local attention, have conversations with people in your community about how to get your voice out there. You're going to get some kind of like this informal nudge, you'll get somebody who will reach out to you and be like, hey, I did this thing this time. Is this ever something that you're going to be interested in? You'll get a little nudge like that. And that's the moment when you get to think to yourself, do I want to do this? Do I want to contribute to a group of people who might be working on testimony? If you do, that's the moment to be like, yeah, absolutely, I'd be happy to jump in on that. This is also hard because many of us who have lives, caregiver duties outside of work, this is extra work. This is extra logistical and emotional work for you. Be aware of that. I don't have children. I don't watch appointment television. I have a profoundly supportive spouse. And as a result, I have some of the extra bandwidth to do this. It doesn't feel like it all the time, but I do have the ability to do some of this, and I find it meaningful. If you do, consider the opportunity for yourselves. What's going to happen when you get invited to testify? A lobbyist, pause for impact, is going to ask you if you are interested in doing so. They'll likely have a hearing that they want you to attend or want you to know about for the future. This may not be very far away. It's not like DEF CON where we know it's going to happen every year. It's not like they schedule these things regularly. What will happen often, especially if it's an important one, is it'll come up right away. They'll schedule a hearing on a major issue that breaks in the news within 7 to 10 days. Within days often, and that's at the national level. At the local level, you may not find out about it until the day before, the hour before, that you might be asked to do something like this. In all likelihood, especially if it is your first time doing this kind of testimony, you're going to get told about it 4 to 6 weeks in advance because the hearing will be on the legislative calendar. Folks, go look up the legislative calendar when you get done from here, and you can take a look at the Washington State Senate and House's legislative calendar, their schedule of hearings. For everybody in this room, what you are interested in is Environment, Energy, and Technology Committee for the U.S. Senate, or for the Washington Senate. Environment, Energy, and Technology Committee, okay? Those are the people who pretty much in general are talking about the stuff we care about. If you're dealing with the intellectual property people, the trade people, they're going to talk to more lawyers, really, than actual technologists. So look for the legislative calendar and consider just attending one. And that's because it's going to be super, super interesting when you show up. You might know just a little bit in advance or weeks. You will be told, or you should ask, how many minutes you will have to testify. It was my experience that I was told that I would have 5 minutes to testify for that first testimony for right to repair. I was given 2 minutes. And in the time between me finding that out, about 10 minutes before I was going to walk up to that podium, I was told that information, and I had to strike a bunch of my testimony and get it down to under 2 minutes, okay? So you may be told that, but it may also fluctuate. I'll tell you how to prepare for that in a moment. There's going to be a person who's going to help you through that day when you drive to Olympia, when somebody takes you to Olympia and you see the Capitol building, okay? If you haven't been there before, parking is shite. Get there early, okay? Prep for airport security, you'll be fine. If you can get through TSA, you're fine getting through security there. They're kind of terrible, honestly. Like, I brought my husband, and you don't want to know what he got in the door. Oh my God. He was like, babe, look at that. I was like, oh, okay. He doesn't really do that. He's way cooler than that. He's way cooler than me. So prep for that. You will pay out of pocket to do this. If somebody else is paying for you to do it, guess what that makes you? Right. So this part sucks because economic privilege is also at least partially required to do this. For my Senate testimony, it probably cost me $3,500. I mean, it was an expensive time of year. I got to buy meals. I got to fly there. I got to get a car. I got to get rides and stuff like that. It was $3,500 probably to do the 2 or 3 days because you want to arrive a day early to make sure nothing happens with your flights, right? It was expensive. It's always expensive to do this. Be aware that that's the case, and the legislature is not going to pay your travel expenses. They want to know if you will show up on your own. That's part of why you see the visible privilege of the people in the room, because they can afford to be there, and they have the time to be there, and they have a wife at home taking care of the kids. I mean, bluntly, that's what's happening, okay? So I'm being super, super real. Wait till we get to the non-video part of this situation. But you're going to pay out of your own pocket for this travel. When you prepare for this, write your testimony word for word. Skip your source citations. They assume that because you're there, you're the expert, you're the one getting cited. That's kind of cool, actually. You just make shit up if you want. Don't do that. So write it word for word, okay? And I will also, by the way, folks, be releasing these slides online, so all the information, including clickable links, will also be out there for you, okay? Have it reviewed by a bunch of smart people, all right? People that know what it is like to testify, at least one person who knows what it's like to testify. At least one person who has helped review testimony before. At least one person with experience with the legislators or the committee that you'll be testifying in front of, okay? Have it reviewed again and again. When you think it's ready to deliver, think about the time limit that you asked about before. In my experience, it is very difficult to get out meaningfully in front of a crowd more than about 70 to 80 words a minute when it comes to legislators. I'm going to speak for the rest of this slide in the tempo and tone that I would use when speaking in front of a legislature. The reason I'm doing that is to let you know what it's like when you deliver your own testimony in front of a bathroom mirror again and again and again. Time it, all right? Build it very much so there are parts you can take away and add, if needed, very easily in just the period of time that you are sitting at a desk or at a table waiting to testify. You may discover that the people sitting next to you have said something interesting and you want to add a single line that is a joke or plays off of what they said or simply acknowledges who they are. And in my experience, almost no one remembers to include the timing of, "Thank you for the invitation to testify here before you today, senators and members of the committee." That takes like 10 seconds just by itself, and you gotta be polite. Deliver it again and again, and finally, be funny, but only if you can be real. All right, now I'm gonna speed it back up again, or we're never gonna get through all this. When I wrote my original testimony for Right to Repair, I included a line that was not written entirely by me. I'm an offensive information security researcher. That's how you pronounce hacker when testifying in front of a legislative committee. It landed, and it's what really worked in that moment. It was real, and I meant it. Don't be funny because you're being cute. Be funny because it's true. This is the line that resonated with the people in the room who were listening to my Senate testimony. How many of you are familiar with the Cyber Safety Review Board? Good. Right now, and this is still true, if the CSRB was operating, if the NTSB, right, our aviation security folks, worked like the CSRB does now, NTSB investigations would be conducted by the FAA administrator, the chief pilot at Boeing, and the chief revenue officer of Delta Airlines. That hit home for them in a way that was meaningful. And it got interest It got attention. The reporters in the room understood what I was talking about, and that's the reason this is the thing out of all of the stuff I said about WannaCry and vulnerability management and the processes and procedures we needed, this is the one that popped for them. Be funny, but only if you can be real. Here's a very real moment, and it is possibly the only time he's ever actually been funny. Senator, we run ads. It's true, and every one of us was roaring as a result of seeing this because it's true. And that's why it was funny, okay? Now, let's also talk about what that reality looks like when you're bringing all of yourself to that kind of testimony. If you're scared about not showing up the right way or not sure if you'll represent your community the right way, okay? Everybody in here can bring their real, true selves to this. And I'm going to show you the single greatest example of legislative testimony I have ever seen. I give you Mr. G. Snyder of Twisted Sister. This testimony was real, and it was true, and it was joy-filled and funny, and it made an impact because D. Snyder brought what he was to this moment, and it worked. He wasn't playing to the audience. He was genuinely bringing himself and a representation of his community to the legislators there. He wasn't playing to the room. I watched Hassan Minhaj, I think, do a testimony where he was clearly playing to the room instead of testifying to the legislators. And it's one of the reasons I don't use it as an example here. This is the greatest testimony I've ever seen. You can be you, you can have blue hair, you can do whatever you want to do in that room as long as you are respectful and truthful and your community would be proud of you, okay? You're fine doing that. So, the day you testify, you're going to be so bored. Oh my God, you're going to be so bored because you're going to get there like 4 hours early and be like, I wanted to make sure I was here on time. And then you're just going to sit in a hallway on like some cold ass like granite or whatever and be looking around, and it's going to be interesting for about 5 minutes, and then you're going to be like, all right, Candy Crush, whatever. It's going to be boring, and then it's going to be terrifying for 20 seconds. You know, it's information security, right? 99% boredom, 1% total terror, right? So this right here is really surprising to me. Your room in which you testify is either going to be like fully empty, or it's going to be so jam-packed, people are going to be roaring from the halls, distracting. You'll be, I don't know, I was more nervous in the empty room than in the packed room because I know what to do with an audience. But an empty room is a scary thing, right? Like there's no way to tell if you're doing it right. So that's really nerve-wracking for me personally. I don't know what the experience of folks in the room is. Just out of curiosity, like for the folk in the room, would an empty, I'm going to ask you, empty or full, would an empty room be more frightening or problematic for you? How about a full room? That's about what I expected. It's about half and half, honestly, right? And so be prepared, whatever your scary version of that is, be prepared for that to happen to you, okay? And just be ready for it. Maybe get a sympathetic person in that audience that you can't see the people behind you. You can see the senators. Focus on one kind-looking person who's probably like a 23-year-old staffer sitting behind one of the legislators. And if they look like they're like, oh yeah, just look at them, okay? Don't let it freak you out, because you can't see what's happening behind you, but you can hear the rustles and laughs of the crowd. And it's like there's this time delay a little bit in what you say when that happens. Bring a device and bring 3 printed out copies of everything that you're going to say. Bring a highlighter and bring a pen, all right? The reason you're going to do that is because in the moment when you're delivering the testimony, or even just a few minutes before, you may discover that there are segments of the testimony that you need to strike out, you won't have time for them, or that someone has said something that causes a problem with what you're going to say. Choose to have either a very reliable electronic device from which you can read your testimony, or you can have a piece of paper. I used paper for the Senate testimony, and I originally used my iPhone for the original right to repair testimony because I discovered I needed to cut a bunch of stuff quickly, and I didn't have a way to do that on the paper I was holding. So be aware that this is a technical thing. Be ready for the live demo to fail, okay? That's really what it is right there. The questions that are going to happen are going to come not from the policymakers. It's going to happen because a staffer is going to lean over and they're going to whisper something, or they're going to pass a note to the policymaker, who will then ask a question of you, if you get asked questions at the end. And if that happens, the policymaker might screw up the question. Don't laugh. It's the Finsta one. Oh shit, the Finsta one. Still to this day, it's hard. But be aware that they might screw it up. Answer the intent of the question. Don't point it out. I know we want to argue and clarify. I know we want to be like, well, is what you meant, or I think you might have meant. Don't do that. Everything is start with thank you, Senator, for the question, and move on into answering the question you think they're asking. If you need to, say, I think I'm giving the correct answer, or I think you're asking me about, if you need to, but not if you don't. Don't waste your time, all right? And time is going to go so fast. You're going to be in and out of there in a blink. You'll barely even notice it happening. When you read your original testimony that you have written down or on a device, it's going to happen really quickly. Don't speed up, all right? If you need to, and I've had this happen before, get a card where you have 4 little circles on it, all right? Or get used to doing it under a table, and 1, 2, 3, 4. And just use whatever your personal pattern is, or tapping your foot, or anything unnoticeable. It could be just any of your gestures, any ways that you cope with the pressure of being in front of an audience or need to use to self-soothe, do it. Absolutely. Just practice in advance so that you know it is an available technique to you, okay? Like, this is the only audience I've probably ever had to say this to, because most people would have no idea what I was talking about with, like, here's how you chill out when you're trying to be a technologist and get information across fast. Chill out, right? You could do it. All right, time's going to go super fast. What's going to happen right afterwards? A policymaker or legislative director, that's an LD, they're going to say LD a lot. This is the person who actually does the stuff behind the scenes, right? This is the person writing or requesting or discussing legislation. The legislative director may reach out to you and say, hey, can we set up a meeting? Can we talk to you? Can you suggest more people for us to talk to? That is a person that you definitely want to make friends with. They want help, they're asking you for it, and this is a fractious, frustrating, beautiful community of people, and there are as many opinions as there are people in it, right? So if they want you to summarize things for them, remember that they don't know all the stuff that we know, all right? And that your job in that moment is to translate with clarity on behalf of the community as opposed to kind of go off on a tangent. I've done that kind of a lot, and it doesn't help, okay? All right, organizations. By that I mean nonprofits or companies or legislative directors, anybody at all who see you do this well and with humor are going to ask you to do it again, all right? You might be asked to do so on a national level. In that moment, you've already got a crew. Almost certainly you won't be asked to do national level testimony if you've never done it before or have never participated in the process before. This isn't going to come at you out of the middle of nowhere, okay? This will be something that you are a very well-known expert in, and I have done a lot of work on the CSRB, okay? That's the reason I was asked in that moment to come and testify, all right? You might be asked to do this. It's okay if that happens. Get friends. You've got a crew. Stay ready to speak if you want to get called upon often. It's pretty common for state legislatures to have someone drop out at the last moment. And if they have a technical expert drop out of a hearing, you could get called on pretty quickly, especially if the organization that is sending somebody knows that you're competent to do it. They'll brief you and say, hey, 6 hours from now, someone dropped out. Could you show up via Zoom? Could even be in a different state. I think I testified once in New Hampshire, a couple times in Maryland maybe, but a few times that I've been asked to show up. Sometimes they haven't even gotten to me in the hearing, but I was there and was available. You may show up and find out that they never get to you. They might just not call the section of panel that you're on. So there's some frustrating elements to it, but just be ready to speak if you want to be part of this community. All right, last part about this. Find your allies in this moment. Find allies that can assist you in getting your voice heard and where you can provide them with more allies. Let's talk about what an ally looks like. This does not have to be a dirty word. Lobbyists are the people who are paid to convene appropriate experts to get across a point of view. And there are organizations that we all know and are proud to be associated with that have lobbyists. Few of them are solely lobbying organizations, but many of the organizations that we know and are proud to be associated with engage in policy lobbying. Their titles usually aren't lobbyists. Usually their title is something like Director of Government Affairs or Policy Director. And pretty much when you see somebody get advertised for with one of the big companies and their title is going to be Director of Government Affairs or Policy Director, and it's a mandatory relocation to Washington, D.C., that's going to be their job, right? It's 80% that's what they're going to be doing. And they have to be there because this process is a personal one. It's a handshake one still, and it is opaque. And people who know how to navigate that opacity are the ones who are successful in roles like this. I don't think I ever want to do that job. I like doing what I do. And at the same time, I find myself often thinking to myself, I wish it was done better. And that's a very short step away from me deciding I'm going to do something about it. So here are some organizations that lobby. US PIRG, the Public Interest Research Group, is an organization that has a bunch of local organizations that do work on right to repair, abandonware, e-waste, the consumer safety and product safety. All right, so the kinds of places that do work on whether or not something needs a product recall. All right, US PIRG is the organization, if I recall correctly, that was reached out to and then was partnered up with an organization called Secure Repairs. Secure Repairs is a little teeny right to repair organization that was founded by Paul Roberts, and I knew him back in 2019. I knew some of the folks involved with it and some of the people involved with PIRG. These are folks who work in the public interest, who research into safety, information security, device security, that kind of stuff, all right? And they lobby. They lobby for right to repair bills to get passed. EFF. They have people who actually work on this, right? That work on lobbying to manage the information security knowledge deficit in Washington, D.C. Thank God that they do it, right? ACLU, we all know they've got lobbyists, right? And same thing for Center for Democracy and Technology, right? These are organizations that pay to have somebody explain how technology works well to people that need to know it in Washington, D.C. I don't necessarily mean they're lobbying on behalf of like a political party. This isn't necessarily partisan at all, but they are lobbying on behalf of an issue to try to solve a problem, right? Information security, consumer safety, equal legal protections, and whether or not the internet is accessible to everybody, okay? These are organizations that can help. So where are your local organizations? Again, I'm gonna make this publicly available for you, okay? How do you find local organizations? This one right here, WashPIRG, all right? PIRG.org/Washington. That's the organization called WashPIRG. That's the one everybody in here, like throw them $5. Because they are the ones that are in Olympia trying to make sure that right to repair bills aren't quashed by lobbyists for large tech companies who are trying really hard to keep devices protected. So these are the folks you want to throw $5 at. EFF, the Electronic Frontier Alliance, are the local organizations. Go to the one and you're looking for any organizations involved in Washington. I happen to know that the EFF will be coming to the state of Washington over the week of RSA. God damn it. So if you want to reach out to those folks, the EFF is going to be doing a couple of listening tours and some conversations, like the 6th, 7th, 8th of May, I think. So, and I'm going to be not here. And I look forward to finding out if anybody got a chance to connect with them. ACLU of Washington. These are also folks who do work on things like social data privacy. I know a good friend of mine, Savannah Sly, who now runs the New Moon Foundation. She used to be at ACLU Washington, and what they were working on was data protections and privacy for sex workers, right? Because we always need to think about the fact that people at the margins of the community are the ones who are the most likely to be the canaries in the coal mine of eroding protections against surveillance and data privacy. So this is important work to be doing, and if you're interested in it, reach out to these folks. Nationally, This is how you get a hold of the folks from Center for Democracy and Technology. Those are the people that you want to have a conversation with. And nationally, Hackers on the Hill. Who's heard of Hackers on the Hill? Yeah, that's because this guy founded it. And you're going to have a conversation with him in a minute. Now, these folks down here, they don't do tech, or they don't do lobbying, okay? Hackers on the Hill just does the tech. If you don't know where to go to get help on your testimony and you want to know whether or not you are full of shit before you deliver testimony to the legislature, call them. Well, email them, right? Who's got a phone? So this is your moment where we get a chance to really kind of get real about this. I spend a slice of my time in this world because I care deeply about it, because I've got a background in it. My day job, I'm the CEO of Red Queen Dynamics. We do SaaS compliance for small businesses through their managed service providers. Like I'm a dirty vendor. A dirty vendor, right? We have a security product that we sell through channel sales to MSPs. I love what we do because it means that people who normally don't have security protections, or anyone doing the emotional work on, do you have MFA? You know, have you done an asset inventory? This kind of stuff, we've managed to make it something that is accessible for people that don't understand what information security is or means to their small business, because there's never been the CEO of a 30-person trucking company that cared much about an asset inventory when trucks weren't driving, right? So that's a thing I care about personally, and I think that this is the reason I care about this, because writ large, what we are all dealing with, from senators to anybody that you might walk out on the street and have a conversation with, are people that don't know enough about information security to make good decisions. That's what I care about. And I care about the idea that someone might be disempowered to make their own decisions about information security, all right? So these are the folks that you want to have a conversation with. Now, last but not least, what I want to do is do an AMA. Now, I have asked that we turn the recording off. Is that okay? Can we turn the recording off in a minute? One last second. What I'll say is, if we're going to end the recording portion of the conversation, what I will say is, I'm glad to know that we are ending it, because otherwise I would just say, it's such a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon, members of the committee, and thank you for your time today.